Welcome back here to Fox 2 News in the morning. Mortgage rates have dipped into the mid 6% range, and that is bringing a lot of buyers back into the market. But this week, there is also a lot of buzz surrounding a proposed 50-year mortgage plan. Joining me here this morning is Brian Bristow with Keller Williams, here to break this all down for us. Brian, a lot to discuss this morning.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you here. So first, let's talk about interest rates right now and how this is driving buyers and sellers as we're headed into the winter months.
Yeah, so recently we've seen a drop in interest rates, or at least in our area, to kind of the low mid-6 range. About the 6.3 to 6.5%. And typically what this means for us right now is that buyers who were maybe a little bit more hesitant earlier in the year when rates were closer to 7% or perhaps a little over that, they're getting comfortable thinking about, a strategy for how they might jump in and start thinking about buying or looking for houses again.
And you were telling me that you saw mortgage applications rise last week. What do you think that means in terms of the winter season?
Yeah, so this was really interesting. So the first week of November saw a 6% increase week over week for mortgage applications, which was the highest increase weekly since the month of September. It also was the strongest start to November for mortgage applications since 2022, which, as we all know, is an incredible housing market. So one thing that buyers and sellers can really glean from this is that there's still a lot of activity in the market. Even though a lot of people kind of think of this time as one that gets a little bit slower for real estate,
Sure.
There's a lot going on. And so anybody who's maybe been considering buying or selling, it's a good time to start those conversations.
And there was a point in time for a while where buyers didn't really have much leverage. Has that changed?
Yeah, so this was another interesting thing. Really starting in August, some of the things that we track, kind of homes for sale, average days on market, and months of supply, those have started to slowly increase since August. What this means for buyers is that they're really more in a position to where they can ask for concessions, include contingencies and contracts, and I think a lot of sellers are willing to work with buyers on these things. So.
The other thing getting a ton of attention in recent days, of course, the proposed 50-year mortgage plan. Do you think that's ever going to happen, and what would this actually mean?
Yeah, so this one is really interesting. And in theory, I think it sounds good, being able to stretch your cost of home ownership an additional 20 years over a 50-year period. But there are really some drawbacks kind of in practicality. The first, as we know, the average age of a home buyer these days, or for first-time home buyer, is 40 years old. So if a 40-year-old buys their first home with a 50-year mortgage product, the likelihood is that they unfortunately would be leaving behind generational debt as opposed to generational wealth. The second thing is, with a longer mortgage period, the rate at which you're going to build equity becomes so much slower because those front-end payments are stacked so much more heavily towards interest. A lot of homeowners use that equity in their home for pulling cash to consolidate debt, do home improvements, send kids to college, things like that, all of which would become virtually impossible if the equity is building that much more slowly. And then finally, there are several other things that, especially with the legal kind of congressional approvals and things like that, would present big hurdles in order for the 50-year mortgage product to actually be something that would be possible.
Totally. That short-term effect of maybe having a lower mortgage payment month to month might sound great on paper, but yes, that interest 50 years later is really going to add up, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing too to consider is that over the 50-year period, on an average home that costs maybe $450,000, the interest for a 50-year mortgage would more than double compared to what it would be for a 30-year mortgage. So the total interest over that 50-year period would be north of $1 million, meaning that your total cost of ownership on a $450,000 house could be upwards of $1.5 million. So
Wow.
something
Staggering.
important to consider. Yeah.
Absolutely. I could pick your brain all day, but before we wrap things up, anything you just want to let people know if they're waiting for that right moment to buy or sell, what would you say?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing really is to make sure that you're working with a trusted real estate professional. Find somebody that you can connect with, that you trust, that's got great background and experience. We as real estate agents are here for the clients. It's our job to make sure that we know all of the nuances that are going on in the market. And help clients kind of craft strategies, whether for buying or selling, that will help them ultimately achieve their goals. And so now is a great time to start having those conversations, whether you're thinking about doing some action, whether it's buying or selling immediately or waiting, a little bit longer. At least we can go ahead and get those conversations started.
Most definitely. Brian Bristow, thank you so much for being here. If you want to learn more about Brian Bristow and Keller Williams, we'll post more info on our website, fox2now.com. You can watch this entire segment there as well. We'll be right back with sports.